The wind screamed across the Wyoming plains like a living thing bent on destroying everything in its path. And Vincent Nolan knew that anyone caught out in this blizzard would be dead by morning. He had been checking his fence line when he spotted the dark shape half buried in the snow, just a stone's throw from where his property met the open range. At first, Vincent thought it might be a deer or an injured calf, but as he urged his stallion closer through the whipping snow, his heart lurched. It was a person, a woman from the looks of it, face down in a drift that had formed against a cluster of sagebrush. Her dark cloak was coated white, and she was not moving. Vincent dismounted faster than he had in years, his boots sinking deep into the powder. He was a large man, broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, and at 28 he had seen plenty of harsh winters, but never had he found someone so far from town in conditions like these. He knelt beside her and carefully turned her over. She was young, maybe early 20s, with dark hair plastered to her pale face. Her lips had a bluish tint that made his stomach clench with fear. He pressed 2 fingers to her throat, searching for a pulse. There, faint but present, thank God. Without wasting another second, Vincent gathered her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her body limp and cold as ice. He managed to get her situated across his saddle before mounting behind her, holding her secure against his chest as he turned his horse toward home. The wind fought him every step of the way, but his stallion was sure-footed and knew the path, even when Vincent could barely see 5 feet ahead. The ride back to his cabin felt eternal, though it could not have been more than 20 minutes. By the time the sturdy log structure came into view through the swirling white, Vincent's arms were aching and his face was numb from the cold. He did not care. All that mattered was getting this woman inside and warm. He kicked the door open and carried her straight to his bed, the only one in the small cabin. It was not much, just a single room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table, 2 chairs, and his bed tucked in the corner, but it was warm and dry. The fire he had banked before leaving was still smoldering. Vincent laid her down gently and immediately set to work building up the flames. Once the fire was roaring, he turned his attention back to the woman. Her clothes were soaked through, and he knew he had to get her out of them or she would never warm up. His hands hesitated for just a moment, propriety warring with necessity, but necessity won. He worked quickly and clinically, removing her wet cloak, dress, and undergarments, trying not to think about anything except saving her life. He wrapped her in every blanket he owned, and then added his own spare clothes for good measure. Her skin was still dangerously cold. Vincent knew what he had to do, even though it made his ears burn. He stripped down to his union suit and climbed into the bed beside her, pulling her close to share his body heat. She was shivering now, which he took as a good sign. Shivering meant her body was still fighting. He held her like that for hours, listening to the blizzard rage outside while he willed his warmth into her. Gradually, her shivering subsided and her breathing grew deeper and more regular. The bluish tint faded from her lips. Vincent felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. She was going to make it. Exhaustion crept over him as the adrenaline faded. He told himself he would just rest his eyes for a moment, but the warmth of the fire and the relief of knowing she would survive pulled him under into sleep. When Vincent woke, pale morning light was filtering through the cabin's single window. The blizzard had finally blown itself out. He became aware of 2 things simultaneously. First, the woman in his arms was awake. Second, she was staring at him with the most striking green eyes he had ever seen, and she looked absolutely terrified. Vincent released her immediately and rolled away, nearly falling out of the bed in his haste. "You are safe," he said quickly, holding up his hands. "I found you in the snow." You were dying. I am sorry for the circumstances, but I had to get you warm." The woman pulled the blankets up to her chin, her eyes darting around the cabin and then back to him. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "My cabin, about 5 miles north of Rhyolite. My name is Vincent Nolan. I have a ranch here." He stood up, very aware that he was only in his union suit, and grabbed his pants from where they hung by the fire. He turned his back to her as he pulled them on, giving her what privacy he could. "What is your name? What were you doing out in that storm?" There was a long silence. When he turned back around, her expression had shifted from fear to something more complicated. Confusion, maybe, or sadness. "Julia," she said finally. "Julia Barrett. I was trying to reach Rhyolite. I had been traveling with a wagon train, but there was fever. My father and mother both died 3 days apart. The wagon master said we could not stay with them anymore, that the fever might spread. He gave me a horse and some supplies and told me Rhyolite was northeast." Vincent felt anger flare in his chest. "He sent you out alone. In late November, he gave me a map. I thought I could make it, but the storm came up so fast." Her voice cracked. "The horse threw me when lightning struck nearby. I tried to find shelter, but everything looked the same. I just kept walking until I could not walk anymore. I am sorry about your parents." Vincent moved to the fireplace, needing something to do with his hands. He added wood to the fire and then filled his battered coffee pot from the water bucket. "You are lucky to be alive. If I had not been checking that fence line, if I had not found you when I did." He did not finish the sentence. They both knew how it would have ended. "Thank you," Julia said softly. "You saved my life." Vincent glanced at her over his shoulder. In the morning light, even wrapped in blankets with her hair a tangled mess, she was beautiful. He turned back to the fire quickly, unsettled by the thought. "You can stay here until you are strong enough to travel. I will ride into Rhyolite when the snow settles and let them know you are safe." "Were you expected?" "No, I do not know anyone there. My parents and I were heading to California. My father had heard there was work in the gold fields, and my mother thought the climate might be better for her health." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That turned out to be wishful thinking." "What kind of fever was it?" "The doctor who died the day before my mother said it was typhoid, but he was half drunk when he said it, so I do not know if that was the truth." Vincent absorbed this, calculating the risk. Typhoid could spread, but it had been days and Julia showed no signs of illness beyond the exposure to the cold. "How do you feel? Any fever, stomach pain?" "No, I was caring for them both and I never got sick. I think whatever it was, I did not catch it." He nodded, relieved. "Then you should be fine, but you need rest and food. When did you last eat?" "I am not sure. Yesterday morning, maybe. I had some hardtack in my saddle bag." Vincent poured 2 cups of coffee and brought one to her, careful to keep his eyes averted while she adjusted the blankets to free one hand. Then he set about making breakfast, such as it was. Salt pork, beans, and the last of a loaf of bread he had baked 3 days ago. It was not fancy, but it was hot and filling. They ate in awkward silence, Julia still in the bed wrapped in blankets and Vincent at the table. He tried not to stare, but he found his eyes drawn to her again and again. There was something about her that intrigued him beyond her beauty. Maybe it was the way she held herself, dignified despite her circumstances. Or the intelligence he saw in her eyes when she looked around the cabin, taking stock of her surroundings. "You live here alone?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Yes, I have been working this land for 6 years now. Built the cabin myself the first winter. It is not much, but it is mine." "It is a good cabin, sturdy, warm." She paused. "You are not married?" "No, why not? You must be, what, late 20s? Most men are married by now." Vincent shrugged, uncomfortable with the question. Never found the right woman, I guess, and ranching does not leave much time for courting. I go into town maybe once a month for supplies. Not a lot of opportunities to meet eligible young ladies. Julia smiled, and it transformed her face. I suppose not. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Vincent slept on the floor by the fire while Julia took the bed, though he could see the guilt in her eyes every time she looked at his makeshift bedroll. She grew stronger quickly, and by the third day she was up and moving around the cabin, insisting on helping with the cooking and cleaning despite his protests. The snow was deep, too deep for him to risk the ride to Rhyolite yet, so they were stuck together in the small space. Vincent found he did not mind as much as he thought he would. Julia was easy to talk to, and smart. She had been educated back east before her family headed west, and she could discuss everything from literature to politics with an insight that surprised and delighted him. On the fourth evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Julia asked him about the ranch. "I have about 300 head of cattle," Vincent explained, whittling a new fence post while they talked. "Had to sell off some this fall to pay for winter feed, but the herd is healthy. Come spring, there will be calves and I can build the numbers back up. I also have a dozen horses. I breed them, sell them to the army mostly. Do you have help? Hands to work the ranch?" I had 2 men working for me through the summer and fall, but they headed south for the winter. They will be back in March. Until then, it is just me. He glanced at her. And now you, I suppose, until we can get you to town. What is in Rhyolite for me? Julia asked quietly. I have no family, no money, no prospects. I will arrive as a charity case dependent on the kindness of strangers. Vincent stopped whittling. You could find work. There is a hotel, a saloon. They always need help. You mean as a serving girl, or perhaps something less reputable? There was an edge to her voice. I did not mean that. I just meant there are opportunities for a woman willing to work. Julia sighed. I am sorry. I should not have snapped at you. You have been nothing but kind. It is just that I do not know what I am supposed to do now. Everything I knew, everything I planned, it is all gone. Vincent set down his knife and the half-carved post. You could stay here. The words surprised him as much as they seemed to surprise her. Julia's eyes widened. Stay here. Vincent, I could not. What would people think? I am not suggesting anything improper. I just mean that you could stay until you figure out what you want to do. I could use the help around here, honestly. Cooking, mending, keeping the place tidy. I would pay you wages, same as I would pay anyone, and you would have a roof over your head and food in your belly while you decide on your next step. Julia was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. That is a generous offer. Too generous. You do not even know me. I know you are brave, you are a survivor, and you are a hard worker. I have seen that this past week. That is enough for me. What about propriety? A single woman living with a single man. My reputation would be ruined. Your reputation is already going to take a hit when you show up in Rhyolite with a story about being rescued from a blizzard. Folks will talk no matter what. At least this way you will have some security while they are gossiping. Julia looked at him then, really looked at him, and Vincent felt something shift in the air between them. It was a feeling he could not quite name, a mixture of anticipation and nervousness that made his heart beat faster. I will think about it, she said finally. 2 days later, the weather cleared enough for Vincent to make the ride to Rhyolite. Julia stayed behind at the cabin, and he found himself oddly reluctant to leave her. He made the trip as quickly as he could, stopping at the general store to stock up on supplies and to spread the word that he had found a woman nearly frozen in the snow. The storekeeper, a portly man named Samuel Harris, listened to the story with wide eyes. She is staying at your place. Alone with you. She is recovering from exposure. Where else would she stay? I am just saying people might talk. Let them talk. The woman nearly died. I am not going to toss her out because of gossip." Samuel held up his hands. "I am not judging, Vincent, I am just warning you. You know how people are." Vincent did know, but he did not care. He collected his supplies, sent a telegram to the territorial marshal to check if anyone was looking for a Julia Barrett, and headed back to the ranch. The sun was setting by the time he arrived, and he could see lamplight glowing in the cabin window. It gave him a warm feeling, coming home to a lit window. He had not realized how lonely the dark cabin had been until now. Julia met him at the door, taking packages from his arms. "I was getting worried. I thought maybe the trip had been too difficult. Just took longer than I planned. The snow is deep in places." He stamped his boots clean and stepped inside. The cabin smelled amazing. "What have you been cooking?" "I found some dried apples and made a pie. And there is stew on the fire. I hope you do not mind that I went through your stores." "Mind? This is the best my cabin has smelled in years." He grinned at her and she smiled back, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. They ate the stew and pie, and Vincent told her about his trip to town. "I sent a telegram to the marshal, just to make sure no one is looking for you. And I told Samuel Harris at the general store about finding you. Word will spread from there. If anyone in Rhyolite knows anything about your wagon train, they will know you are safe." Did he ask questions? "About me staying here," he mentioned propriety. "I told him you were recovering, and that was that." Julia set down her fork. "I have been thinking about your offer, about staying here and working for you." Vincent's chest tightened. "And I want to accept. But I need to know that it really is just a job, that you are not expecting anything else from me." "I would never expect that. You have my word." "Then I accept. I will stay and keep house for you, and you will pay me fair wages. And when spring comes, if I decide I want to move on, I can do so with no hard feelings." "Agreed." Vincent held out his hand and Julia shook it. Her hand was small in his, but her grip was firm. He felt that strange flutter in his chest again and quickly released her hand. The winter deepened, and so did the connection between Vincent and Julia. They fell into an easy partnership, working side by side to keep the ranch running. Julia proved to be resourceful and capable, tackling every task he gave her and often anticipating needs before he voiced them. She learned to milk the cows, to collect eggs from the chickens he kept in a small coop behind the cabin, to churn butter and make cheese. She mended his clothes and sewed new curtains for the window from fabric he brought back from town. She even helped him tend to a sick calf, staying up all night to make sure it took the medicine he had mixed. Vincent, for his part, found himself working harder than ever, driven by a desire to impress her that he did not fully understand. He repaired the roof where it had been leaking, built new shelves for her to store her things, and even constructed a privacy screen so she could have a corner of the cabin to herself for changing and washing. They talked for hours in the evenings, sharing stories of their pasts. Julia told him about growing up in Philadelphia, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a clerk. She had been engaged once, to a young lawyer, but he had broken it off when her family announced they were heading west. He said he could not marry a woman who would choose that kind of life, she said, her voice matter of fact. "I suppose I should have been heartbroken, but mostly I was relieved. I did not love him, not really. I was just doing what was expected." Vincent told her about his own family, parents who had died of cholera when he was 19, leaving him alone in the world. "I worked on other men's ranches for years, saving every penny. When I finally had enough to buy this land and some cattle, it felt like everything I had been through was worth it. This place is mine. No one can take it from me." "You have built a good life here," Julia said. "You should be proud." "I am, but it has been lonely." The admission surprised him, but once it was out he could not take it back. Julia looked at him across the firelight, her expression soft. "It does not have to be." Something in her tone made his pulse quicken. He wanted to reach for her, to close the distance between them, but he held back. He had promised this was just a job, nothing more. He could not break that promise, even if his feelings were starting to grow into something deeper. Christmas came, and Vincent rode to town again for supplies. He returned with a small wrapped package that he gave to Julia on Christmas morning. She unwrapped it carefully, her eyes widening when she saw the delicate silver hairbrush inside. "Vincent, this is too much. You needed a brush. Your old one was ruined in the storm. It is practical. It is beautiful." She ran her fingers over the engraved handle. "Thank you." "I have something for you too," she said, reaching behind the privacy screen. She pulled out a knitted scarf in deep blue wool. "I bought the yarn the last time you went to town and worked on it in the evenings after you went to sleep. I wanted to surprise you." Vincent took the scarf, struck by the care she had put into every stitch. "This is the finest gift I have ever received." They were standing close now, closer than they usually allowed themselves. Vincent could see the flecks of gold in Julia's green eyes, could smell the lavender soap she used. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "Julia," he said, his voice rough. "Yes, I know I said this was just a job. I know I promised nothing more, but I have to be honest with you. My feelings have changed." She did not pull away. "Mine too. I do not want you to feel obligated. You are here because you needed help, and I do not want to take advantage of that." "You are not taking advantage." She reached up and touched his face, her palm warm against his cheek. "I care for you, Vincent. More than I should, maybe, but I do." He covered her hand with his own. "I have fallen in love with you. I think I started falling that first morning when you woke up and looked at me like I was some kind of grizzly bear you were not sure about." Julia laughed, her eyes bright with tears. "I have fallen in love with you too. You are the kindest, most honorable man I have ever known." Vincent kissed her then, a gentle press of lips that sent warmth flooding through his entire body. Julia kissed him back, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet cabin while snow fell softly outside. When they finally pulled apart, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Julia. I know it is fast, and I know I do not have much to offer, but I promise I will spend the rest of my life making you happy." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." They were wed in late January in the small church in Rhyolite, with Samuel Harris and his wife standing as witnesses. Julia wore a simple green dress she had sewn herself, and Vincent wore his best shirt and vest. The ceremony was brief, but when the pastor pronounced them man and wife, Vincent felt a joy so complete it took his breath away. The townspeople gave them curious looks, and a few disapproving murmurs followed them as they left the church, but Vincent did not care. He had Julia, and that was all that mattered. The ride back to the ranch was cold but clear, and Julia sat pressed against his side in the wagon, her hand tucked in his. "Are you happy?" he asked her. "Happier than I have ever been," she said, and he could hear the truth in her voice. Their first night as man and wife was tender and sweet, both of them nervous but eager. Vincent had never been with a woman before, and Julia confessed she had not been with anyone either. They learned together, fumbling at first but finding their way, and when they finally lay tangled together in the bed, both breathless and flushed, Vincent knew he had never felt more complete. Spring came slowly to Wyoming that year, the snow lingering into March, but eventually the thaw arrived. Vincent's hired hands returned, two gruff but good-natured men named Tom and Henry, who took the news of his marriage with good-natured ribbing. Julia fit seamlessly into the expanded household, cooking for the men and managing the domestic side of the ranch with the same efficiency she had shown during the winter. The cattle calved successfully, and the herd grew. Vincent sold some horses to the army at a good price. Money was still tight, but they were making it work. More importantly, they were happy. In late summer, Julia began feeling ill in the mornings. Vincent fretted over her, worried that she had caught some illness, but Julia laughed and took his hand, placing it on her still flat belly. "I am not sick, Vincent. I am pregnant." The news filled him with a joy so fierce it was almost painful. He picked her up and spun her around, making her laugh and scold him at the same time. "Put me down. You will make me dizzy." "We are having a baby," he said, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. "Julia, we are having a baby. I know, are you happy?" "I am terrified and thrilled and about a dozen other things I cannot even name. But yes, I am happy, so happy." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Julia bloomed, her skin glowing and her eyes bright. She remained active on the ranch until Vincent finally convinced her to take it easier in the last months. He fussed over her constantly, much to her amusement, bringing her tea and extra pillows and insisting she rest more. "You are going to drive yourself mad at this rate," she told him one evening as he tucked a blanket around her for the third time. "I just want to make sure you are comfortable. You are carrying our child. I am pregnant, not made of glass. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "Not my woman, not my child." She smiled and pulled him down for a kiss. "I love you, you overprotective man. I love you too." In February, almost exactly a year after they married, Julia went into labor. Vincent sent Tom racing to town to fetch the doctor, while he and Henry did their best to help Julia. The labor was long and difficult, and by the time the doctor arrived, Vincent was nearly out of his mind with worry. But Julia was strong, and just after dawn on a cold but clear morning, she delivered a healthy baby boy. Vincent held his son for the first time with trembling hands, awed by the tiny perfect being that he and Julia had created. The baby had a shock of dark hair and Julia's delicate features. He was beautiful. "What should we name him?" Julia asked, exhausted but radiant as she watched Vincent with their son. "I do not know. I have been thinking about it for months and I still have not decided. What do you think?" "I always liked the name James, after my father. James Nolan." Vincent tested the name. "I like it. James Nolan it is." The baby fussed, and Vincent carefully handed him back to Julia, watching in wonder as she nursed him. This was his family, his wife and his son. He had never imagined he could feel this complete. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered, and Vincent was able to expand his land and his herd. James grew from a baby into a curious, energetic toddler who followed his father everywhere, chattering constantly. When James was 3, Julia gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Sarah, who were as different as night and day despite being born minutes apart. Emma was quiet and thoughtful, always watching and learning, while Sarah was loud and fearless, constantly getting into mischief. Vincent built an addition onto the cabin to make room for their growing family, adding 2 more bedrooms and a proper kitchen. It was not a grand house by any means, but it was filled with love and laughter, and that made it perfect. Julia thrived as a mother and a rancher's wife. She started a garden that produced vegetables all summer, which she canned for winter. She raised chickens and sold eggs in town, using the money to buy fabric for clothes and small luxuries for the children. She taught herself to play the old piano that Vincent bought for her one Christmas, and in the evenings the cabin would fill with music. Tom and Henry remained with them, becoming like family. They doted on the children and helped Vincent with the increasingly demanding work of running the ranch. A few years after the twins were born, Tom married a widow from town and brought her to live in a small house Vincent helped him build on the far edge of the property. Henry remained a bachelor, claiming he was too set in his ways to change. When James was 7, Vincent started teaching him to ride and to work with the cattle. The boy took to it naturally, and Vincent felt a deep pride watching his son learn the skills that would one day allow him to run the ranch himself. The twins, now 4, were a handful. Emma loved to help her mother in the kitchen and garden, carefully learning to knead bread and plant seeds. Sarah preferred to be outside with the animals, and she had a particular talent with the horses. Vincent would often find her in the stable, talking softly to the foals and feeding them treats she had sneaked from the kitchen. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains, Julia rested her head on Vincent's shoulder. "Did you ever imagine your life would turn out like this?" "No," Vincent said honestly. "When I was alone here before you, I thought this was as good as it would get. A successful ranch, enough money to be comfortable, independence. I did not realize how empty it all was." "I never imagined this either. When you found me in that blizzard, I thought my life was over. I had lost everything. But really, it was just beginning." Vincent kissed the top of her head. "You gave me everything, Julia. A family, a home that is more than just walls and a roof, a reason to get up every morning beyond just work. I do not know what I did to deserve you, but I thank God every day that I found you." "We found each other," Julia corrected, "and we built this life together." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play in the yard. James was showing his sisters how to skip stones in the small pond Vincent had dug near the house. Emma's throws were careful and precise. Sarah's were wild and enthusiastic, sending water splashing everywhere. "I want another baby," Julia said suddenly. Vincent looked at her in surprise. "Another? We have 3 already." "I know, but I love being a mother, and you are such a good father. I want a bigger family." "You are sure? Pregnancy is hard on you, I am sure." "Unless you do not want more children." "I want whatever makes you happy. If you want another baby, then we will have another baby." Julia smiled and kissed him. "I love you, Vincent Nolan." "I love you too, Julia Nolan." Their 4th child, a boy they named Robert, was born the following spring. The birth was easier than the previous ones, and Robert was a calm, happy baby who seemed content to watch the world around him with solemn blue eyes. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch continued to prosper, and Vincent's reputation as a fair dealer and skilled rancher spread throughout the territory. He was offered a position on the town council, which he accepted after Julia encouraged him to get more involved in the community. He used his influence to push for better schools and roads, wanting to make Rhyolite a good place for his children to grow up. Julia became involved in the church and started a ladies' aid society that helped new families settling in the area. She never forgot what it was like to be alone and desperate, and she made it her mission to ensure no one else had to feel that way if she could help it. When James was 15, tall and strong like his father, Vincent began giving him more responsibility on the ranch. The boy proved himself capable and trustworthy, and Vincent knew that when the time came, the ranch would be in good hands. The twins, now 12, were growing into young women. Emma was still quiet and studious, spending hours reading every book she could get her hands on. She talked about becoming a teacher someday. Sarah remained wild and free-spirited, an accomplished rider who could rope and brand with the best of the ranch hands. She declared she was never getting married, that she was going to run her own ranch someday. Robert, at 8, was the peacemaker of the family, always smoothing over arguments between his siblings and making sure everyone was happy. He had a gift with animals, able to gentle even the most skittish horse with patience and a soft voice. One winter evening, as the family sat around the fire after supper, Vincent looked at Julia across the room. She was mending a shirt, her head bent over her work, lamplight making her hair glow. She was 40 now, with a few strands of silver in her dark hair and fine lines around her eyes from years of smiling in the sun. To Vincent, she had never been more beautiful. She looked up and caught him staring. "What are you looking at?" "You." "I was just thinking about that first morning, when you woke up in my bed and looked at me like you could not decide if you should be grateful or terrified." Julia laughed. "I was both. You were this large, strange man, and I had no idea what had happened or where I was. But then you started talking and I realized you were kind and honorable, and I thought I could trust this man. I am glad you did. So am I." James looked up from the piece of leather he was working into a bridle. "You never told us the whole story, how you met, I mean." "We have told you," Vincent said. "I found your mother in a blizzard. But what was she doing out there? Why was she alone?" Julia set down her mending. "I suppose you are all old enough to hear it now." She told them about the wagon train, about her parents dying, about being sent away. She told them about wandering lost in the storm, about giving up hope. "And then your father found me and brought me here. He saved my life in every way a person can be saved." "You saved mine too," Vincent said. "I just did not know I needed saving until you were here." Emma, always the romantic, sighed. "That is the most beautiful story." "It is ridiculous," Sarah said, but her voice was soft. "You could have died. But I did not. And now we are all here together. Everything that happened, as hard as it was, led to this, to all of you." The children absorbed this, and Vincent could see them looking at their parents with new understanding. They were not just mother and father. They were people who had lived and loved and suffered and triumphed. More years passed. James married a sweet young woman named Catherine from a neighboring ranch, and they built a house on Nolan land. Vincent helped him get started with his own small herd, knowing that eventually James would take over the main ranch, but wanting him to have something of his own too. Emma went to Teachers College in Cheyenne and returned to teach at the Rhyolite School. She boarded in town during the week, but came home every weekend, bringing books and stories of her students. Sarah, true to her word, saved her money and bought a small piece of land adjacent to the family ranch. She ran a horse breeding operation that quickly gained a reputation for quality. She did eventually marry, choosing a quiet cowboy named Luke who was content to let her run things her way. Robert, at 17, was still at home and showing interest in veterinary medicine. Vincent was encouraging him to pursue it, even if it meant leaving Wyoming for a while to study. "You have a gift," he told his youngest son. "You should use it." Vincent was 55 now, his dark hair gone silver, his face lined from years in the sun and wind. His body ached in the mornings, reminding him he was not the young man who had built this ranch with his bare hands, but he was content. More than content, he was happy. Julia was 52, and to Vincent, she was as beautiful as the day he married her. She moved a little slower now, and she let the younger women in the church take over most of the heavy work of the Aid Society, but she was still vibrant and engaged with life. They were sitting on the porch one summer evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold when Julia said, "I have been thinking about that blizzard, the one that brought me to you. What about it? How different my life would be if you had not found me. I would have died out there alone and scared. Instead, I got all of this. A husband who loves me, 4 beautiful children, grandchildren on the way, a home and a community and a purpose. It is more than I ever dreamed possible." "I think about it too," Vincent admitted. "About how close I came to losing you before I even knew you existed. If I had checked the fence line an hour later, or if I had gone a different direction, or if I had decided It was too dangerous to go out at all. So many little things had to happen exactly right for us to find each other. Do you believe in fate? I do not know. Maybe. Or maybe it was just dumb luck. Either way, I am grateful for it every single day. Julia took his hand, her fingers lacing through his. I love you, Vincent. I have loved you for more than 20 years, and I will love you for however many we have left. I love you too. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. They sat together as the stars came out, holding hands and listening to the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. From the house came the sound of Robert playing the piano, the notes floating out into the warm air. It was one of Julia's favorite songs, one she had taught him. The years continued to pass gently. James and Catherine had 3 children, adding to the growing Nolan family. Emma married a fellow teacher and had twin boys. Sarah and Luke had a daughter who was every bit as fearless as her mother. Robert went to veterinary school in Colorado and returned to set up a practice in Rhyolite, where he cared for animals from all the surrounding ranches. Vincent and Julia grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They faced hardships, drought and disease and loss, but they faced them together, and that made all the difference. They celebrated victories, the success of their children, the birth of each grandchild, the continued prosperity of the ranch they had built together. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were more than 20 people crowded into the house and spilling out onto the porch. The tables groaned with food and the air rang with laughter. Vincent stood and raised his glass. I want to make a toast. 30 years ago, I married the woman of my dreams. I found her in a blizzard, frozen and near death, and I brought her here to my cabin. I thought I was just saving a life. I did not know I was finding my future, my purpose, my heart. Julia, you have given me everything. You are my partner, my best friend, the love of my life. Here is to 30 more years together. 30 more years, everyone echoed, raising their glasses. Julia stood, tears streaming down her face. I cannot speak without crying, so I will just say this. Thank you, Vincent, for finding me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for this beautiful life we have built together. I love you with everything I am. They kissed while their family cheered, and Vincent felt the same flutter in his chest he had felt all those years ago when he first realized he loved her. As the party wound down and the family dispersed to their various homes, Vincent and Julia walked slowly to the pond. The moon was full, reflecting on the still water. This was where they often came to talk, to be alone together, to remember who they were beyond parents and grandparents and ranchers. Are you happy? Vincent asked, the same question he had asked her so many times over the years. Happier than I ever thought possible, Julia replied, the same answer she always gave. No regrets, not a single one. Well, maybe I regret not making you build a bigger house sooner. Trying to fit everyone in there today was chaos. Vincent laughed. We can always add on more rooms. At our age, I think we are past the home improvement stage. Speak for yourself. I am still spry. Julia poked him in the ribs. You are a stubborn old man, and you are a beautiful old woman. Flatterer. They stood together, arms around each other, looking at their reflection in the moonlit water. 2 figures, bent slightly with age but still strong, still together. You ever wonder what would have happened if things had been different? Julia asked. If I had made it to Rhyolite safely, if someone else had taken me in, sometimes. But I always come to the same conclusion. We were meant to find each other. One way or another, we would have ended up together. I like to think so too. Vincent turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. Thank you, Julia, for saying yes when I asked you to stay, for taking a chance on a lonely rancher with more hope than sense, for building this life with me. Thank you for finding me. for seeing me, not as a burden or a problem, but as someone worth saving, worth loving. They kissed under the stars, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. The ranch continued under James's capable management, as Vincent finally stepped back and let the next generation take over. He and Julia spent their days in quieter pursuits, tending the garden, playing with grandchildren, taking slow rides around the property they had worked so hard to build. Vincent's health began to decline in his early 70s, his heart growing weak. The doctor in Rhyolite, the same man who had delivered Robert all those years ago, told Julia gently that Vincent did not have much time left. She told Vincent what the doctor said, and he took it calmly. "I've lived a good life, Julia, a full life. I am not afraid." "I am afraid," she admitted. "I do not know how to be without you. You are the strongest person I know. You will be fine, and I will not really be gone. I will be in this ranch and our children, in every sunset you watch from this porch. I will be with you always. That is not the same as having you here, holding my hand. I know, I am sorry. Do not apologize. Just stay with me as long as you can. I promise." Vincent lasted through the summer and into the fall. As the leaves turned gold and the air grew crisp, he grew weaker. He spent his days in a chair on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the ranch he loved carry on without him. His children and grandchildren visited constantly, and he delighted in their company, in the evidence of the legacy he was leaving behind. On a cool October morning, with Julia holding his hand and the sun streaming through the window, Vincent Nolan closed his eyes for the last time. He died peacefully, a small smile on his face, surrounded by love. Julia mourned him deeply, but she did not break. True to his prediction, she was strong. She remained on the ranch, helping where she could, but mostly watching with pride as James ran things with the same dedication his father had shown. She spent time with her grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather, making sure they knew what kind of man he had been. She lived 5 more years after Vincent's death, years filled with quiet contentment and the comfort of family. When she died in her sleep at the age of 76, her children buried her next to Vincent on a hill overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over it together for eternity. On Julia's gravestone, James had inscribed a simple message. Found in a blizzard, she found her home. Beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She lived fully and loved deeply. The Nolan Ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down through James's children and their children after them. The story of Vincent and Julia became family legend, told and retold until it took on an almost mythical quality. The couple who found each other in the worst of circumstances and built a life filled with love and purpose. But for those who had known them, who had seen the way Vincent looked at Julia even after 30 years of marriage, who had witnessed Julia's strength and grace through joy and sorrow, the story was not a myth. It was simply the truth of two people who found each other when they needed it most and chose every day to keep finding each other, to keep building, to keep loving, until the very end.